As we continue our journey with Christ throughout Lent, we are watching for signposts along the way. Signposts that help point us in the right direction. We began our journey hearing an invitation to embrace the grace in our midst. This was followed by a call to discipleship, the setting aside of those things we thought of as important in our lives so that we might hold on to that which we are given. This week, we are encouraged to watch and listen in order that we might understand that our destination is not an earthly one, but a heavenly one. This is important for us to see because if we cannot, then on Good Friday, the day we remember when Jesus was nailed to the cross, like the disciples who lived it in real time, we can find ourselves asking, what was the purpose of the journey we've been on anyway? Now some of you might think, oh no, we won't. We know what happens next. We know about the resurrection. We know that Jesus' death did not represent an end, but instead it opened a door through which we are invited to continue our journey to a place where we will finally experience the fullness of God's grace and love. As such, though, some may say this journey that I've been talking about this Lent, the one from the mountaintop to the cross, it's not a real journey, is it? It's kind of like figurative, because we really can't go back and relive the events that have already occurred. And that raises the question then, why don't we call this journey what it appears to be? A remembrance of times gone by. Well, one reason we talk about this journey in the present tense is that if we were only to see it in the past tense, something that happened long ago, then its impact happened long ago. And there are no real consequences for us today. However, hearing it in the present tense enables us to better see and understand how the events, the words, and the journey itself continues to have an ongoing consequence in our lives. Take, for instance, this story of Jesus overturning the tables in the temple courts. As a past event, we see that it's sort of like that camel or the straw that breaks the camel's back for the religious leaders. They were so angry at what they perceived to be Jesus' arrogance, they began to plot to kill him. Looking at it in the present, though, we are somewhat detached from their anger. And we find we are better able to ask the questions of what were they really angry about? What is it Jesus was really doing? Looking at it this way, we can see that the religious authorities were upset because they felt that what was going on in the temple courtyards was necessary for the function of the temple. A place where people journeyed to make their sacrifices of thanksgiving and their sin offerings to God. They needed animals that were pure for this sacrifice. And they needed someone to inspect the animals to make sure that they were pure for the sacrifice. And they needed money changers so that the pilgrims who came to Jerusalem did not use money with graven images to buy the pure animals for their sacrifice. Over the years, they had trouble controlling this. And they learned that the best way to control it is to bring it into an area where they have control. The problem was, the place they selected was a place in prayer and worship. Be it, for the courtyard of the Gentiles, not the faithful Jews. Still, it became not just a marketplace, but a place where human will overrode the will of God. And when human will becomes more important to us than the divine will, then we find ourselves wandering from that path before us. And sometimes this diversion happens slow and is insidious. Other times it is the result of a faithful attempt to honor God's will that has somehow become jaded, like the events occurring in the temple courts. And sometimes it happens because we think we know better. However it happens, if we don't pay attention to the signpost along the way, we can find ourselves face to face with some real spiritual and possibly physical dangers. And while spiritual dangers are hard to see sometimes, the physical ones are not. In fact, we hear about people all the time who get hurt or cause someone else to be hurt because they ignore the sign to not text while driving, or to ignore that sign that says, "Stay away from the edge," or who simply decide they want to take a shortcut that is not completely safe. But in fairness, some will ask, how can we know what signs to follow? There are so many signs out there, it can get confusing. And in the world in which we live, to be safe, we must use common sense. And when it comes to the spiritual world, well, we kind of got to do the same thing. The difference is, in the world, we tend to rely on ourselves and those around us. In the spiritual world, we need to tend to believe in the Holy Spirit. The same Spirit Jesus said would lead us into all truth, and that would remind us of the signs and teachings Jesus gave to help us along the way. The sign we are given in today's gospel is not the overturning of the tables. That was a sign for them then. Note the disciples remember it as a sign of the past. One we can read today in Psalm 39, verse 9. No, the sign we are given, according to Jesus, is the resurrection. Unfortunately, as we're going to hear in the Passion narratives in Holy Week, not everyone who sees this sign will accept the truths it reveals. This is true of those who were witnesses to it then, and to many who hear it now. Still, for those who do, they are promised passage through a doorway that leads not only to everlasting life, but to a place in a life where the fullness of God's grace and love are no longer aspirations, but reality. And this promise offers us hope that as it grows becomes what we know and call faith. Faith that the grace we are invited to accept is real. That grace surrounds and protects us as we journey with Christ. And as we learn today, is grace that enables us to see the signs before us and the truth they reveal. But having faith is not the end of the journey. as we will hear next week, it is just the next step along a path that takes us from where we were to where we are going. Amen.